Hello and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Nate Rifkin has prospered by combining ancient mystical practices with modern strategies for living. Nate used to be suicidal and drank alcohol every morning to get through the day. He dropped out of college, went broke, bankrupt, and even worked on street corners waving around a sign to afford rent and food. Wow. But he's managed to turn his life around, find love, and now has an incredible life. His secret? A practice from the spiritual tradition of Taoism. Nate has published a book on this ancient practice called The Standing Meditation, Excel in a Modern World Using an Ancient Practice. As a leader in the field of business, he has written marketing campaigns that have generated tens of millions of dollars in sales. Nate lives in Golden, Colorado with his lovely wife. He publishes his articles at naterifkin.com. Nate, it's a pleasure to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Casey, I'm honored to be here, and I'm excited with what we can talk about. I hope I can really change someone's life.
I think you can. I'm sure you will. And let's start by changing their physical location. This is your time to shine. You live in Colorado. I'm still have my application into the Colorado State Board to get funding for this show. I'm trying to send everybody out that way and away from Utah. We are getting way too crowded. Salt Lake is becoming Denver. And so I want you to just talk a little about how great Denver is, convenient airport. There's never any traffic. You can get to, Vail Ski Resort in like 10 minutes. Like that's what it's like, right?
Oh yeah, 10 minutes. Yeah. I really appreciate how you want to publicize Wyoming and talk about how great it is to move to Wyoming.
Laramie is amazing.
It almost sounded like you said Denver. I don't know why you said that. Because I tell you, this Wyoming place, I'm telling you, open space.
Yeah, exactly. Go there. Go to Laramie. I remember this was probably a few years ago. It was a Sunday morning. I had driven to Denver and I needed to leave. So I thought okay, I know ski traffic's pretty bad on 70. So I'm going to leave at 5:30 to beat the traffic. Yeah. And I was parked on I-70 for hours. It was crazy.
I mean, yeah, we joke about it, but it's kind of a thing now. I mean, there's so many people there that you have to meticulously plan your ski adventures. We're just in a new world.
That's crazy. Well, you live in Golden and it has one of the best pizza places I've ever been to. So let's plug Woody's. What a great place to post up and have a pint and have a slice. What a great spot you live in.
Yeah, it's I think it's still a buffet style thing. So it's just I don't know what they're trying to pull there. But yeah, also, although I will mention that place also incredibly crowded now. There is a waiting list all the time.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, tell us about yourself. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Massachusetts and was absolutely miserable. And actually, it's kind of interesting because when I was, I forget how old I was, but I was pretty young. I was pre-teenager. I saw the movie Dumb and Dumber, and the characters in Dumb and Dumber, Harry and Lloyd, they go on an adventure, a cross-country road trip, and they end up in Aspen. And that movie is what inspired me originally to move to Colorado.
Wow.
I mean, of course they go to Aspen. It's a movie. So of course oh, wow, Colorado looks great. Well, yeah, but it's fine. That's what happened. That's what inspired me.
That's hilarious. That John Denver's full of shit.
Unlike them, I managed to stick to I-80 or whatever, and I got there on time.
That's great. Yeah. That's hilarious. What a great link. We haven't talked about Dumb and Dumber on our show, and I'm really glad we have now. You said growing up, boom, did it. You said growing up was pretty rough. What things were you experiencing as you were growing up?
I mean, I had parents that were just really, really emotionally cut off, and they just had their own issues. They honestly, they didn't love each other. And they were not really equipped to raise children at all. So my dad was very, very absent. I mean, he was around and he worked and he provided. I mean, I think underneath it, he's a decent person. He's a good person. He definitely is today. But he just didn't really want children. And he decided to just not be involved in raising children at all, not emotionally, not interact, not play around really, which I guess in his mind, it's well, I don't want to screw him up. I'll just kind of remain neutral, but it was really devastating. I didn't get how devastating that was until I was older. And my mother she was just a very angry, kind of hostile woman. So I grew up being angry, and I got more and more depressed, and I was a socially awkward person. The older I got, the worse it got. Like through high school, um, I just became more depressed because in my mind, I'm just like, everyone else is having these in my mind, it's like everyone else has these happier lives. Everyone's kind of becoming more mature, developing themselves, dating, going to the prom and all that. And I thought I was a total loser. Um, some of that was just my own skewed perception because we always like look at the grass is greener, and the people are happier and more successful on the other side of the fence. But some of that was actually legitimate, just because I kind of had that stumbling childhood. So I thought everything would change when I went to college because I'm like, okay, I'm going to be in a new town. I went to UMass Amherst. That's where I ended up going, which is also in Massachusetts. But it was in Eastern Massachusetts. So I'm just like, I'll be around total strangers, new people. I can start over because they don't know me. I mean, they don't know my history. I can transform myself. Well, my first day on campus, and it's this gigantic campus. It's like 18,000 students live on there. It's like a small town, or an average sized town. It's huge. Um, my first day there, I realized how wrong I was because I could move somewhere else and I could get around new people, but I was still that same awkward guy carrying around this like dark cloud of self-hatred. Um, so I actually decided, speaking of owning, because you have your own business, helping people get in shape and healthy out there in Utah. I actually want to go down a similar path. I didn't know what, maybe a personal trainer, or maybe like a gym owner, or maybe selling products online. But I want to be kind of self-employed or an entrepreneur in some way, and in the health niche, because lifting weights was kind of my one uh, oasis in all this misery, because it felt good. It was a solitary activity for me, and it felt really good, and it was sort of like my doorway into like being able to change yourself. So I was thinking and thinking and thinking about all this, and I decided to drop out. I dropped out of college after 3 semesters. I mean, I packed up my things in the middle of the year, said goodbye to nobody. I mean, nobody knew I was even probably gone at that point, because it's just UMass was just a sea of people, and I never really developed any friends. Um, and I dove into self help big time. And I bought it all of it, hook, line, and sinker, like everything that any self help guru would publish. It's like, I started setting goals. I cut out the things from magazines and got a glue stick and made a vision board. I mean, when people came over to my condo, I like took the thing down and hid it because I was just so embarrassed about having a vision board. But um, and I did the positive thinking thing. I did affirmations. I'd stare at myself in the mirror and say them. If my neighbor heard me, they probably thought I was nuts. Um, but and here's the thing: none of that really. I was missing something because I did not achieve a single goal I set, and I worked hard. I actually started a business with my older brother selling yoga products online, where I handled all the business stuff, and I used all my personal credit, and I got deeper and deeper into debt. And I was so bitter and frustrated that all the self-help wasn't working. And dude, I was a lonely guy. Like I didn't have any friends. I couldn't get a date to save my life. My life just kind of sucked. Um, and by the way, this is after I moved to Colorado. So at least I'd done that. I'd kind of set off and started my dream adult life, and got away from the East Coast, which just didn't resonate with me. And I started drinking alcohol every morning. I drank I don't know what, it was like a couple of shots of vodka. And I mixed it with an energy drink. So that was like my breakfast every morning. And that was like the low point of my life. That was like it went on for a while, but that was kind of like my rock bottom.
I don't remember seeing vodka and energy drinks on part of this complete breakfast next to like the orange juice and like the cereal. Yeah, I mean, that sounds so isolated and lonely. So what happened? Like, how did you get yourself out of that mess? I mean, how much debt were you in?
Um, you know, I tried to look up how much debt I was in, like when it got to the worst. I mean, but it was over $100,000.
Oh,
I can tell you that. Um, I wish I actually tried. Spoiler alert: I later went bankrupt, so I tried looking up my bankruptcy like filing and all that because I mean, hey, that stuff's public record. So if anyone wants to snoop around, they could they could look up my bankruptcy. It was in Denver County. But yeah, it was like six figures. I mean, because I would get to the point where I would max out a credit card and I would spend it on it could be it was usually a business expense. Like I would max it out buying advertising or something like that. And then when it came time for the minimum payment, I mean, this is my fault. Like the bill would come and I would just dump it on the floor and cover it up with other mail and
yeah.
forget about it.
Wow.
And eventually you get sold to debt collectors. I had a cop show up at my door and knock on the door and I opened it. It was the Boulder sheriff. Or I don't know if there's more than one sheriff or deputy or something. It was one of them. And he handed me an envelope. He's like, oh, hi. He's very friendly. He's just like, oh, it's nothing bad. So I take the envelope. I'm like, oh, thank you. And he leaves. And I immediately like tear this thing open. And it was one of the debt collectors working with the state of Colorado. And they'd filed a lawsuit against me.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is bad.
Wow.
So they didn't actually want to drag me to court. They just wanted me to because they included a little note in it saying like, just sign this and pay us on time and we'll drop your case. So I'm like, yes, sir.
Wow. Man, that's crazy. I've been in credit card debt before, and I would say fairly deep credit card debt. And it is one of the most soul crushing, difficult things to pull yourself away from. I mean, I would do the same thing. I would like hide the bills and pay the minimum and not want to know like the full scope of things. It's pretty difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely relate. I was in the same spot. And it's awful because that's exactly how you get into this like death spiral. Because looking back, I mean, if I had look, all I had to do was just pay the minimum on time. That would have I still have been in a terrible spot, but at least that's manageable. But by ignoring it, that's how people just wreck their financial lives, just wreck them. Because I wrecked mine. I know that there is a happy ending that I eventually climbed out of it, but it did require a lot of time because of the little errors I made. Like not the minimum payment was $39. That's a small error to not pay it, but it adds up to something awful.
Wow.
But anyway, as to your question, how did I climb out of it? So I eventually got really bitter and frustrated, especially when I was drinking every morning, because I'm just like, I see people all the time and they build successful businesses and I don't see them like doing affirmations and stuff. Like I read biographies of business moguls and famous people. It's like some of them set goals and some of them didn't. It's just like, so wait, what is going on here? And I'd even dabbled in like meditation and stuff. And I don't know, it just wasn't working for me. So I had one business like mentor that I was going to like meetups where he taught like marketing and advertising. And as it was like a quarterly like meetup mastermind situation. And what I didn't know is that he actually had a very spiritual side to him as well. And he was really into a spiritual tradition called Taoism. And he started teaching Taoist meditation. And this is someone who would, he spent a lot of time in China. So he learned some pretty cool information, and something about it caught my eye. It was just that, honestly, it sounded really exotic and really cool and really secret, which appealed to me. And I decided, you know what? This is so different from everything else I tried, but I really like the idea of doing like really, really deep inner work. So I'm going to try this out. And at the very least, hey, maybe I'll feel some cool like reactions in my body because of energy or something like that. I don't know what's going to happen, but it sounds cool. So I started doing it. I started doing like 60 seconds a day. Because the first meditation he taught me was done standing up with your knees unlocked. And that made my thighs burn like crazy. So I started with 60 seconds and I added 5 seconds a day. And interesting thing happened was that I actually started feeling good. Like in my body, I started feeling good. And I started feeling such a buzz over time. And this was after days, a few weeks of practice. I started feeling such a buzz that when I took a morning, like my drink of vodka and an energy drink, it didn't actually make me feel any better. It actually just made me feel drunk. Like it didn't, I was already buzzing. So I actually stopped drinking in the morning. And this is, I mean, this is just my story. It's just what happened to me. I don't know how anyone else would react, but that's what happened to me. And I actually left that bottle of vodka in my freezer until I moved out of my condo. I just didn't touch the thing again.
Wow.
So I knew I was on to something, and other people started noticing the difference in me who didn't know I was doing any kind of new meditation practice, but they're just like, "Hey, Nate, you're looking more confident. You seem brighter." So that's when I'm just like, I am on to something here. And I actually, since it was the only thing that had ever really worked for me, I just grew. I like to say healthily obsessed with it because I decided to dedicate my life to studying it and practicing it and figuring out what works and what doesn't. And that was how I started to inwardly turn my life around. My life was still kind of a mess from there to clean up, but that's how the inner part started to turn around.
Wow. I came across this work when a friend of mine recommended the book, The Untethered Soul. And there's an entire chapter about this book, this ancient Chinese, writing, thousands of years old, and the kinds of concepts that were in it. And it was the first time I was introduced to the book, The Tao Te Ching. And I would love for you to talk about that and also talk about some of the concepts that are contained in Taoism, because I find them very fascinating and really practical and helpful.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The Tao Te Ching is an amazing book. It's very short. It's a collection of 81 verses. I mean, we don't know for sure, but it's attributed to a man named Lao Tzu, and is written thousands of years ago. So the Tao Te Ching is a very interesting work because it stresses the idea that there is a Tao, there's a way to all of existence, and if you align yourself with this way, you thrive. And if you go against this way, you suffer, and this could be in the form of ill health, or it could be in the form of issues with your mind or your emotions. Actually, a really great way to think of it is in Star Wars, the Force. May the Force be with you. That's like the Tao. In fact, it's interesting. Star Wars has a lot of Taoist illusions. So if anyone's into Star Wars, understand that you're actually kind of getting slipped in a lot of Taoist philosophy with those movies. Now, what's interesting, I'm glad you brought up that book, because what's interesting about it is not just a book of philosophy. It's not just a book of advice on how to live. Embedded within it are a lot of principles of Taoist meditation. And it's very fascinating because there's a verse, and I off the top of my head, I don't know which verse it is, but it's been translated usually as, a key to healthy living, or the way that a person truly lives well is to focus not on like energy in their head, or energy like all over like an open heart. It's to have a full belly. It's not to have a full mind. It's to have a full belly. So a lot of people translate that as, oh yeah, you got to get out of your head and just focus on the simple things and nourish yourself. Actually, that could be true, but it's also talking about deep breathing. It's also talking about imagining energy being in that lower center of your body and rooting yourself there and breathing into your belly. So originally it was probably written as something like, focus on your belly and nourish your belly and draw energy there. And then someone came along several decades ago and translated that as eating.
Mm.
so it's a very in-depth, really cool book. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the concepts contained in there are just a lot of them go over my head, but the ones that connect are just so enriching and apply to so many things in life. In the Untethered Soul, they give the example of the pendulum, and the pendulum swings from one direction to the other, and the way is kind of compared to being the middle, and it's like you almost find the middle by finding your edges. Like, is it good to eat? Like, yes, you should eat. Is it good to eat a ton and be super full and get sick? Like, no, that's not good. And somewhere in between is the middle. That's the middle way. And you find your extremes and slowly dial in. And as that happens, the pendulum starts swinging less and less. And when it's centered, that's where all the energy and power of Tao comes from. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yeah, and there's so many applications. While you were saying that, I was just thinking of how you're the expert on this compared to me. But when it comes to physical training your body, there's a certain level of excitement that you want. Like you want your central nervous system to be jazzed up, but you don't want to be out of control. You want a certain amount of tension, but sometimes if there's too much tension used inappropriately, you're counteracting the force you want to apply to move the weight. um, and even when you're doing a meditation, you want to align your body. You want to keep your spine straight and vertical, sitting or standing. And oftentimes, teachers, what they'll do is they'll teach, okay, lean forward a little bit so you can feel how you fall out of alignment. Now, lean back a little bit to see how you fall out of alignment. And what's interesting is most people, they usually fall forward too much and they're not falling backward enough because we're usually sitting in front of screens or looking at our
Mm.
phones. And then from there, you are able to more naturally find the true center where you're balanced. And because you felt what it was like to be unbalanced, you have a greater awareness of how balance actually feels and the power it can bring.
I love that. That's a great comparison. I think that's one that can be really helpful for people as well. My wife does a form of myofascial release with her clients and helps immensely with people's pain and injuries. And we definitely work with a lot of people who are sitting in front of computers all the time and how that affects the body and affects what you mentioned, the tension. The tension in the body is improperly placed. And she works, because she works with myofascia so much, she does a lot with anatomy trains. And so down in the area where she is, helping her people, we have several posters that show all these different anatomy trains inside the body, connecting the toe all the way up to the tongue, or a system that goes all the way across the body. And people are always like astonished that like everything is connected to everything. And it's all part of the mind body connection. It's right there. That's why that alignment is so important. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And if the what you talk about in terms of fascia, when you train in a standing meditation, or when you train in Tai Chi or some kind of Taoist martial art, um, part of the teaching is to learn to feel how when you move your arm and your hand in a certain way, you're actually stretching the fascia all the way down to the opposite leg. Um, and the idea is you really want to feel this, because when you're moving in that way, that's how you're able to move yourself as a single unit. And it's key to kinesthetic awareness when it comes to your opponent, but also in a solo meditation when you're trying to relax and get into your body rather than be stuck in your head. So yeah, the fascia is crucial, and there's some amazing science coming out showing how fascia is intertwined with the ancient Taoist idea of meridians. Um, and I used to think as like, well, meridians, I don't know. That sounds like something that, people came up with before we had microscopes and before we had more modern understanding of anatomy. But it's actually it's actually like that was their way of figuring out channels that were in our fascia tissue. So it's super cool, and I love geeking out on stuff like this because it increases my faith in the value of these studies, which increases the results that I get, and I think that's true for a lot of people.
Ah, I love that. I mean, it seems it seems like the microscope, yeah, it's great. It's a technological, you know, evolution and something we made, which is great. And we've learned so much from it, but it's also like all of these different traditions and cultures around the world, they'd never had contact with each other, but they all had really similar ideas, whether it's chakras, you talk about, the Tao, it could be spirit, it could be, anything that comes from these cultures, they all seem to have something very similar. Stoicism in ancient Rome, like they all kind of found similar things at the very least.
Yeah, yeah. My teachers say in a beautiful way. They say, we're all walking up the mountain. Now one person may be walking up one side, another person walking up another, but as we get closer to the top, our paths actually start to line up. So yeah, it is pretty cool how all these ancient civilizations, they have different language and they have different flavors, but they're all kind of figuring out the same stuff.
I love that. So how does a Taoist perceive life? Like what makes Taoism unique, even though it's similar to all these things? Like how would somebody who follows the way, how would they react in life to different situations?
That's a great question. The essence of Taoism is seeking harmony through balance. And when I started learning about Taoism, I was kind of turned off at first, because it just seemed like to my kind of mind, my mind wasn't as open as it could have been. It seems like, well, a lot of this is just common sense, or a lot of this is like, well, that's all fine and good, but what? So you want me to like kind of balance myself and stuff? It's like, okay, great. So what I love about Taoism, though, is that I kind of alluded this a little bit before, is that layered within the philosophy are practical applications. And Taoists were very big on starting with the physical body and using as a metaphor for living and developing your physical body in a way that would help you thrive in life. It's like I mentioned earlier in the Tao Te Ching, it's not just a poem on philosophy, but they're applications on how to actually breathe. So what I love about Taoists is that, if there's a problem in life, they're probably going to say, okay, great. How's your breathing? Are you breathing into your belly? Are you imagining energy in your belly? Are you relaxing your muscular tissues when you meditate? Are you able to carry this relaxation and deep breathing into your daily life? Because they were really big on the fact that when you breathe deeply and when you relax and when you integrate this into your meditation, instead of just maybe like sitting there daydreaming, you are working at dissolving emotional blockages. And that's what happened to me. I didn't know it at the time, but when I was feeling a buzz, when I was feeling better, and I eventually stopped drinking in the morning, it was because I was dissolving the emotional blockages and residue and hangups and self-sabotage that was created in my childhood. And I was finally going beyond the surface chatter of my mind and getting to it and digging into it and resolving it. And sometimes it was a painful process, but it felt like a really, really productive process. And as a result of that, that's why Taoists are pretty big on living in a natural way. But the way to live in a natural way is to resolve these inner issues through a daily discipline of meditation. So then when you're able to interact in the world, that's when the Taoist philosophy of, hey, just act naturally, do through not doing, that's when that comes to life. Because when you rid yourself of your emotional hangups with the discipline of meditation, you eliminate your self-sabotage. When you eliminate your self-sabotage, your actions will be natural. And when your actions are natural, that's when you're in the flow of the Tao and you feel like you're not doing because you're in the flow. And we've all been there when we're in a creative zone where we may be working hard, like a great workout. It may be effortful, but we feel like we're freaking flying. That's non-doing. So it's a philosophy that you could study, but it's something you're meant to embody. And the meditative practices are how you start. It's sort of like the on-ramp to embodying it.
Wow. Well, I think the non-doing thing, we have a great kind of modern example. He is animated, subject of a book about Taoism as well. But can you talk about the role of Winnie the Pooh as being a wonderful example of how to live a Taoist life?
Yeah. I think It's really beautiful, and I love it. And I really love the fact that the author created that as a way to sort of introduce Taoist philosophy, especially to children. And I think it's cool because a big part of Taoism is the idea that your acquired emotions, if they're chronic, can really get in the way of you thriving. Like you've got Eeyore, the I guess what is he, a mule? I think he is very sad, and you have Piglet, who's scared. And you have the owl, who is always, as I recall, like overthinking things. And that's, by the way, so what's interesting, I'll dive a little deeper into that. So the Taoists call all of these your acquired emotions. And they're not part of your original soul. They're things that they have some use, but you're meant to actually be able to release them, to be able to overcome with them. They're not meant to actually, hold you by the nose and guide you everywhere, like if you're constantly worried about something. So and they're all connected to certain organs. Sadness is connected to your lungs. Worry is connected to your spleen and pancreas, and actually, overthinking things, overexcitement, like being constantly dwelling on something and kind of being disorganized as a result. That's your heart. So the idea in Taoism is that everything like fear and worry and anger, they can be useful to a certain extent because they can alert you if something's wrong. Like if you're under attack, if you feel anger for a second, that can be useful because you need to defend yourself. But beyond that, you need to let go of the emotion, both because it could wreck your life if you lead your life based on your worries or your fears, and also because it can wreck your health, because when these negative emotions get stored in your body, they can lead to pain and they can lead to health problems. So I love how Winnie the Pooh presents all that, because the story embodies characters with these traits and shows you the folly of following them. Now, the key is how do you be like Winnie the Pooh? So that's where another character that I love that really presents the Taoist way is Yoda from Star Wars. Yoda was really big on, now what's the training to get there, and it comes through discipline, and it comes through getting into your body and out of your head, and it comes through meditative training. So it's super cool how this stuff comes out in kind of modern stories.
Yeah, I love that. You have to apologize to Bethany because now I'm going to watch the whole trilogy, the original trilogy of Star Wars, and she hates it, and I'm going to do it since you mentioned it twice. So I got to apologize to her. You mentioned kind of like different traits and changing things about our bodies, and I want to read something from Winnie the Pooh that I really loved. And it goes, by the time it came to the edge of the forest, the stream had grown up, so it was almost a river. And being grown up, it did not jump and run or sparkle along the way it used to when it was younger, but moved more slowly. For it now knew where it was going, and it said to itself, "There is no hurry, we shall get there someday." And I think that's so beautiful. And I love the concept of like, there's things we can change and do along the way, but yeah, there's other things that are helpful that we can manipulate and use them for. And we don't need to do all the work so hard right at the beginning. You can go through life and kind of slow down and appreciate things more and have the confidence that you'll get there one day. You don't need to be so harsh on yourself with some of the traits that you feel like you need to, change or make better.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's a really beautiful lesson. And the cool part is it's such a multi-layered metaphor because it applies to your health, it applies to your relationships, it applies to business. Yeah, I mean, it applies to so many things. I mean, heck, it applies to dating. I mean, if a guy runs around desperate to get a date, guess how many he's going to get? I could speak from experience. Um, and it applies to business because when it comes to building out, word of mouth, it requires the patience to be able to deliver such an amazing result to clients that when the time is appropriate, they'll tell another client, and when that time is appropriate, they might tell another client, and patience is also required. I mean, my book, I took 3 years to write it. And I actually threw out the first draft entirely and started over.
Wow.
This is, yeah. And I reflected on how this was not a book I could have written in my 20s. I had to wait for 10 years after I began walking this path in order to even start working on this book. And I had to keep, rewriting it because I was changing as I was writing it. So it's a hard lesson for people to get. I think especially younger people. I certainly ignored the lesson, but time is required for you to reach your full potential. Your body is going to adapt at its own pace. You can't berate a wound into healing faster. You can't. I mean, how many guys do you know who are like 19 or 20 who want to like put on how many gargantuan slabs of pounds of muscle? And it's just like, look, there are certain physical parameters to your body. It's going to happen at a certain pace. Your feelings don't matter. They're not going to make a difference. But they do matter in the sense that you can sabotage the process by trying to go too fast. So that's why, Taoists will often deliver their lessons in paradoxes. It's like you by slowing down, you go faster. Well, why is that? Because when you slow down, you don't self-sabotage. And it even applies to a physical context, because when you slow down to the point of stillness and meditation, that's when you can transform yourself the fastest, even if it seems like you're not going anywhere and you're not doing anything, but all is being done because it's being done beneath your conscious awareness.
That is so well said. One of our favorite quotes is, smooth is slow, slow is fast. I think that definitely applies.
That is some Taoism straight up. It's beautiful.
I don't know where we stole that from. I don't know if it was like a Formula One driver or something, but we just absolutely loved it.
Well, that's okay. These mystical traditions, like they were like invading other temples and like stealing stuff for thousands of years. So it's just like, I love it when you read about Buddhism and Taoism. It's like those guys were like, partying and sharing ideas for thousands of years. So it's just like, it was never unmixed,
Yeah, sure. Wow. Well, you mentioned your book, The Standing Meditation. So my first question is, what is the standing meditation for the listener? And the second question would be, when did you decide that you had to tell the story and you had to write this book?
So the standing meditation is a foundation of Taoism and Taoist meditation. So it's how you stand in a certain way and you get into a meditative state. And by standing in a certain way, you open up the idea is you open up your meridians and you open yourself up to ground yourself in the earth, while also opening yourself up to, as the Taoists would call it, the heavens, the heavenly energy. So the basics of how you stand is your feet would be straight forward and you position your feet outside the edges of your shoulders. So it's a pretty decently wide spread to your feet. You tuck your hips forward. It's like you rotate them down and forward. Here's the way I like to say it. Imagine you're sitting on a very high bar stool, like a really high one. It's like you could barely clear it. In order to do that, you kind of have to like nudge your butt under you and tuck your hips in order to just kind of prop yourself onto it. So by doing that, you have to unlock your knees slightly. And this is what I was talking about earlier when it came to like, my thighs started burning when I was practicing this. And then you hold your arms out in front of you like you're hugging a big old tree, or you're holding a really big beach ball, and you tuck your chin down. So what is this doing? All these, it seems like, well, these are a bunch of weird little steps. What it does is it lengthens and stretches and straightens your spine. So what you're doing is you're standing in a way where when you do this, you'll start to physically feel more connected to the earth. Because what's going on is you're able eventually to release your muscular tension and still hold this posture. At first, your muscles will burn like crazy, but eventually your tendons will get strong enough and you'll learn to relax and align your body well enough so that you can actually start to let go. So I started with 60 seconds and I constantly work on relaxing my muscles, breathing into my belly. And in my opinion, in my personal experience, this is it's like meditating times 10. because you're integrating your body, you're integrating the flow of energy to it. And this is the meditation that really changed my life and allowed me to start turning my life around in practical ways. So I wrote the book on it because I love writing and I think this stuff is super cool. And I want to teach this stuff. And because very few people know about this. Like even today, it's like yoga is everywhere and that's great. But it's just like, I'm thinking to myself, Taoism is super cool too, and hardly anyone knows about it. So I'm going to plant a flag in the ground and I'm going to write about it and I'm going to tell everyone I can about it because it changed my life. And I think it can have tremendous benefits for lots of other people.
Wow, that's amazing. So kind of you to be able to do that. You have a really great writing style and make things really easy to understand, which I really appreciate.
Thanks.
I hope you answered this question correctly. Is there an importance on either footwear or the surface that you should be connected to?
Yeah. Ideally, you will be as close to barefoot as possible.
Perfect.
It's not always practical, but and if I'm not barefoot, I love like really minimalist shoes. I happen to just wear a pair of Lems right now, and there's some other really good ones out there that I just haven't tried yet. And ideally, you want to be as physically close to the earth as possible, like in your bottom floor of your home would be great. Now that being said, I went through some of the greatest changes that I did while living in an apartment at one point 6 stories up or 9 stories up or more. So and anywhere is fine. Like it's not like that's ideal, but it's really about doing the practice, but as close to the earth as possible. And from there, it could be pretty intuitive. You want to be in a nice, quiet environment. I also really like locking the door behind me when I do it, because then psychologically, I absolutely know without a doubt that I can't be disturbed, which helps me relax a lot more.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. And you recommend about a minute to get started and then just slowly add time over time?
Yeah, because here's the thing. Without even realizing it, I'd kind of stumbled into a secret to building a good habit into your life, and even taking advantage of if you have a negative habit. Because like I said, I was drinking every morning, so I was just like, all right, I got to pick a time to do some meditation. I'm going to do it first thing in the morning after I shower, but before I drink. So it's very practical minded in that sense. It's like, all right, fine. I started with 60 seconds because it was just so tough on my legs and I wanted to build up my strength. So I added 5 seconds a day because I'm like, my legs probably won't know the difference between 60 and 65 seconds, but I know my body will adapt. So I added 5 seconds every day. Now, as time went on, I got more confident and I was actually able to add more time. I started adding like 30 seconds at a time, let's say. And here's what was cool. Even though I started with 60 seconds, I was building that habit and I was doing it every single day at a certain time in my daily routine. So I started to ingrain like within my mind, my brain, that this was a part of my daily routine. And eventually it became part of my identity. It would feel weird if I stopped. It would feel uncomfortable. And because I felt so good from doing it, I was actually able to let go of the next step, which was drinking, the next step in the sequence. So it was kind of a cool way to use a bad habit to imprint a good one. So yeah, I recommend anyone who, especially if you struggle with developing new habits, it's not a matter of how long you do it per day. It's picking that time in your schedule, your routine, to do it every day until it becomes part of your identity. Then it's like, well, how much time do you want to add? Now you're unstoppable.
Yeah, we could not agree more. I think those small habits done consistently and evenly, you had no idea. I mean, perfect. Let's take it from the Tao Te Ching. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And so
yeah,
it's so important just to get started in whatever you're doing and start where you are and use the tools that you have and be resourceful and just know that over time, this will compound and you're going to end up with something that's far greater than you could ever even imagine.
Yeah.
You mentioned breathing earlier. This is a topic that keeps coming up over and over and over. We could talk about it for hours and hours. Tell us a little bit about like what are the components of proper breathing? And then if you would, like what are some of your favorite tactics to teach yourself to breathe properly and make sure that you are breathing properly?
Sure. A really great way to start is to place one hand on your belly, like right over your navel, your belly button, and place another hand on your chest. So the idea when you want to get into a more relaxed state, a more calm, focused state, is when you breathe, make sure that hand on your belly rises up and rises down. And the hand on your chest ideally will remain still. So I also like to use sort of the metaphor of filling up a swimming pool, and the swimming pool is your torso. Now, when you fill up a swimming pool, the water is going to pool at the bottom first, and then it'll rise up. Now, when you drain the swimming pool, it's going to leave the top first, and eventually the final bit of water to leave will be at the bottom. That's just how it works. Use that with your breath. Your belly fills first, and your belly collapses last. This way, your lungs are getting fully expanded because they expand downward. The whole idea is that you're activating your diaphragm, and in fact, your lungs are empty sacs. In order to fill them, you actually have a diaphragm, a muscle that needs to activate that pushes downward so that a vacuum is created so that your lungs fill. Now, when people breathe from the tops of their chest, that is a panic breath. Now, here's the thing. I bet a lot of people who have tried deep breathing before felt uncomfortable and didn't like it. Here's the thing. At first, it's going to feel strange because when you start breathing deeply, you're going to start giving all your internal organs a massage. Your stomach is going to get a massage, your spleen and pancreas, your liver, even your heart. So this can inspire feelings of panic and discomfort because it's not the sort of quick, shallow breaths that someone is used to having. So as a result, they might think something is wrong, but actually you're adapting to a wonderful new habit, and it's going to feel comfortable eventually. You just have to get through that kind of discomfort. It's almost like I've never been addicted to smoking cigarettes, but I imagine it's a good metaphor for that would be when you first quit smoking, you feel like the withdrawal, but you're actually doing a good thing. Now, from there, it's not just a matter of breathing into your belly and having your belly expand. You actually want to imagine expanding from all angles from your belly area. Now, anatomically, it might not be as pronounced as the front of your belly, but you also want to imagine that you're expanding into your tailbone, expanding into the sides of your hips or just over them. It's kind of like you've got this ball of energy in your belly, and whenever you breathe, it gets bigger. And you're not forcing anything. You do it in a relaxed way. And actually one more thing. I just felt compelled to give your listeners like an added extra cool secret. When a lot of people do this, they'll be like, if you tell them, hey, take a full deep breath, they'll go, okay. And what happens is even if they breathe into your belly, their shoulders will pop up. So also keep your shoulders relaxed throughout the inhale. And this is going to be challenging, but this is key to going into stressful situations and not being rattled, because once you carry this over into your day-to-day life, you'll have like a newfound storehouse of calm confidence.
It's pretty amazing the benefits that you can gain from doing some of these practices. We interviewed James Nestor a few months ago, and in preparation for that, I was doing some of his drills and was a little bit more diligent about mouth taping. And you're right, like it's pretty uncomfortable in the beginning. It's a little shocking too, like seeing your Bolt score, how long you can kind of hold your breath without having a strong desire to take another breath was only like a few seconds. And I consider myself to be fairly healthy and fit and whatever. And it was really low. And to like hold your breath for a minute while walking, to do mouth taping again, some of these practices to really, breathe through the nose and use the diaphragm, like you explained so well, it really just carries over into so many different areas in life. And you're right, it is so much easier to be calm and cool and collected when you're breathing in that way. Just stress just doesn't really have the same effect on you. Another thing that really surprised me, I've heard you talk about this before, is the position of the tongue in the mouth was quite different than what I'd ever experienced before and different than I would have expected. What is the proper position of the tongue in the mouth when you are practicing proper breathing?
Oh, that's a good question. Really, though, the full answer is it's depends on what you're doing. But that being said, because I mean, we could geek out on this tremendously. Like the Taoists had different tongue positions for different meditations and
Oh,
different
wow.
exercises. Yeah. However, the good news is they have like a standard one, which is the essence is keep your tongue against the roof of your mouth. The way I like to teach this is to say the word love, 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 la, 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 la. Notice how to start the word, you touch your tongue kind of on the top of your mouth, right behind your teeth. This is a good resting position. Now, I'm not an expert on like what is best for like sports or what activates like the someone to lift the heaviest weight, because I know there's research on that, but I do know that the Taoists, when it comes to having like the energy circuits of your body connected and the energy flowing through your meridians, they say keep it on the roof of your mouth at all times. And this is especially important when meditating because it's just another way to make sure that the energy goes down and you're not like building up like energy in your head and thinking more and thinking more and thinking more. So that's my guideline where it's just like, hey, you can't really go wrong with that. So yeah, keep it on the roof of your mouth.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I find that's where it just naturally ends up. I don't have to think about it anymore. That's just where it is. And that's, again, it's very different, but it's crazy. Like it makes your teeth feel different. You can take better breaths in through the nose. Like I'm less stuffy. I never snore. Like it's pretty life-changing. Really wanted to ask you, just out of curiosity, like what other physical practices do you incorporate in your life besides the standing meditation? Is there anything you like to do for exercise?
Yeah, I'm loving kettlebells.
Good
Absolutely
answer.
loving kettlebells.
Good answer.
Okay.
Love them.
Actually, you'll find this especially fascinating because everything I just described about the standing meditation, how you relax and how it comes down to like grounding into the earth. The basic 2-arm kettlebell swing is actually tremendously effective for assisting in that because it helps train your body to be relaxed when you're finished with the movement. My teachers actually at Taoism, they are super into kettlebells. Most, not all of them. Some just are not into weight training, but those that are super into kettlebells. And it's a really a beautiful Taoist metaphor because I mean I'm just speaking from my training of them. It goes into the principle of the middle. When you train with a kettlebell, especially a kettlebell swing, you don't train until your muscles are just burning and spasming and you're ready to throw up because you're so exhausted. Because of the swing movement, you have to actually stop before you lose a certain amount of strength because you can't do the momentum of the swing. You're literally not able to swing fast enough. It's not like pumping like out reps on a bench press where you're grinding that last rep out. With a swing, if you do that, you're not able to complete the movement. So you have to stop short. And I think that's just yet another example from the Tao Te Ching about how the middle path is best. So yeah, that's what I like to do. And other than that, right now, I just love walking, and I like those kind of 3 pillars. You have a movement, a heavy, hard movement. You have a super relaxed, like gentle movement, and stillness. If you have all 3, you've got a really great complete system.
That's perfect. We couldn't agree more, especially with the walking. Well, kettlebell swings are probably one of my top 3 or 4 favorite exercises. I think they're a wonderful thing to include. You don't have to start out super heavy. Make sure you're getting somebody to teach you how to do it, because you can't do
Yeah.
it wrong and goof yourself up. But yeah, it is a
Yeah.
really fun movement. I really love that, and love that you went there with that. Man, so you've had quite the life, quite the lives. When you look back on everything you've gone through, what are you the most proud of at this point?
Oh, that's a really cool question. You know, what I'm most proud of is the fact that I started this meditative practice when everything else had failed for me. And here's the thing, it wasn't a fairy tale from there. In fact, I didn't mention it earlier, but so what happened after I started this meditative practice is something that happens to a lot of people when they get on a spiritual path. And that is, my life actually seemed to get more chaotic. I had a business partnership with 2 other guys that I met, that we had a falling out. We started arguing more and more, and they actually cut me out of the business. I literally woke up one day and tried logging into our online software for like our email account and our shopping cart, and the passwords had been changed.
Wow.
And I did not have access to the bank account. I thought about like, well, what are my legal options? And I was just like, this is not worth it. It wasn't like it was this massively successful business either. We were still kind of in the startup phase. So I'm like, this isn't worth it. So I just calmly, let them go, mentally and emotionally, I let them go, which is a lot different from what the younger me would have done. I probably would have gotten very angry and dwelled on it. So I let that go. But the thing is, I was still in a tremendous, remember, I was still in a tremendous amount of debt. It's like we were talking about, I was like 6 figures in debt. So I realized 2 things. By the way, all my income dried up. Like all my business efforts were just crashing and burning. So I realized I need to get a job. And I'm probably going to have to go bankrupt, because even the minimum payments that these debt collectors are demanding, I just can't mathematically, meet them. I can't do it. So I actually hopped on Craigslist, and I thought to myself, speaking of like Taoism, embracing like simplicity and patience, I thought to myself, okay, what is a job I'm qualified for that is not going to be that hard? Like, I don't want to like study for 3 years or 4 years to like go down a career path that ultimately I don't want to get stuck in. I only have so many mental resources and so much time. What can I just dive into? I can get in, get out, cover my rent and food, and still work on some kind of business venture. So I found a job, and it was for spinning signs on the street corner. And the ad is just like, full time, you start at $10 an hour. And I'm like, sold. And you can listen to music. I'm like, double sold, because I can listen to audiobooks. So I actually went in, I interviewed, and they asked me like 2 questions, and I got the job. And I thought to I was like, oh, I'll just do this for like 3 months, da, 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 da. And it was this beautiful moment, because the interviewer asked me, he's like, you're okay wearing costumes, right? And I'm just like chuckling to myself on the inside, because talk about a perfect humbling experience. It's like, this is like something out of a freaking TV show. So I'm like, oh yeah, I can wear costumes, no problem. And I'm like laughing, because I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. And if any of like these people from high school or college saw me, they'd think, oh my God, this dude's a train wreck. This is an absolute train wreck. So I started this job, and it was awesome. I got to listen. The first one I listened to was a Steve Jobs biography, and I'm twirling my freaking sign, and I'm able to stand out there all day because I built up so much rep standing, in a meditative state originally, that I was able to actually do and enjoy myself. And it was beautiful. And I'd have people like honking and flipping me off and screaming the most vile things at me. So one time, I mean, when I could, I'd take my shoes off. One time, this like junior high school kid ran up and grabbed one of my shoes. And I'd like try to reach out and grab the shoe. I'm like, give me back my shoe, kid. And he takes a whiff of it and sniffs it. And it's just like, oh, that smells good. And then hands it back to me. I'm like, what planet am I on right now? So it was perfect though, because this was like life giving me a chance to start over. And I did go bankrupt. And I wiped out like, I don't know, it's like $100,000 worth of debt. But because of the law in the US at the time, I had some recent tax debt that I could not get rid of. So I still walked out of there with over $50,000 of debt hanging over my head. I'm making like $10 an hour. They gave me a raise, by the way. I got up to like $10.25.
Nice.
Yeah. And but it was great because I got to do the simple things. Like there's Taoist philosophy where it's just like, hey, chop wood, carry water. That's what you do before enlightenment. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Now, I didn't get enlightened, but I was scrubbing toilets, I was squeegeeing the windows, and I was learning to just be a functional adult. And that was exactly what I needed. And it was so beautiful. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'll be a sign spinner for 3 months. I actually worked at that company for like 3 years, and mostly as a sign spinner. So you asked me, what am I most proud of? I'm most proud of the fact that I just went through that weird journey and took note of the lessons the entire time. Because I just had a feeling the whole time. It's like, at some point I'm going to talk about this. So I better soak this up and actually cherish it as much as I can. And I did. And I'm proud I did because, again, talk about patience. Over the years, I was actually able to dive back into business, not necessarily as a business owner at first, but I had learned enough about marketing and advertising and writing that I was actually able to do contract work, writing and doing written advertising copy for businesses. So it was kind of funny how all the challenges I went through ended up giving me the skills I needed to thrive in the way I was meant to. And now in this next phase of my life, I want to actually write more books and teach. So everything was setting me up for the next phase of my life perfectly. And I think it's true for everyone. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean it's going to be pain-free. It does mean that you're being handed lessons for your inner growth. And if you're on a spiritual walk, it's probably going to mean even more painful growth. But it's so worth it in the end.
That's amazing. What a beautiful story that could not be more Taoist if it tried. I absolutely love that. It's so amazing. Somebody is listening to this and they have no clue what the hell you're talking about, what Taoism is. They've never heard of it. Standing meditation, they've never heard of it. What is one simple tip you would like to leave for that person who hasn't discovered this world yet?
I mean, really what we talked about with the deep breathing is a great foundation to start with. That would be the one simple tip, and do it. Pick a time in the morning after a certain activity. Like it could be after you brush your teeth. It could be after you step out of the shower, and choose that as your time where it's like, all right, I'll do this 10 times and do it every day and then see where that takes you. That's the one tip. The other tip, of course, would be like, read my book, but I'm a little biased.
Hey, both tips are valid. Nate Rifkin, we have had such an amazing conversation. Where would you like people go to find you and to find your work and to find the book?
Best way is the website, thestandingmeditation.com. It's the title of my book, The Standing Meditation. And right now that'll forward you right to the page on Amazon. If you see the big red book, you're in the right place. And honestly, that is the absolute best way to go, because I wrote that book as if I could travel back in time and hand it to myself. So I can't do that. But the next best thing is if anyone's just like, what the heck? How do I begin? Where do I get started? And tell me some crazy stories to inspire me. That is the book to go with.
Awesome. I love that. Nate Rifkin, thank you again so much for everything that you've experienced and gone through in your life, for finding wisdom in turning a sign and chop wood, carry water. Those lessons are so important. And if you can find joy and happiness and growth and learning in those things, you can do it in pretty much any phase of life. And so we're so grateful for you and your work. Author of the book, The Standing Meditation, Excel in a Modern World Using an Ancient Practice. Nate Rifkin, thank you so much for everything you do. And thank you for coming on our show today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, I was honored to be here, Casey. Thank you.
It was our pleasure. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.